page 7 of your bulletin, but you've probably already heard it before. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. This is Jesus and some people. Noting that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked them, of all the commandments, which is the most important? This guy is saying, Jesus, I want the Cliff Notes version. I don't have time to read the whole Bible. If you could just sum it up for me in a quick second, that would be really helpful. And this is what Jesus says. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. And the second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So you all know that. If anyone asks you what's the greatest commandment, love God and love your neighbor. And I think Jesus is totally cheating because he asked for what's the most important, and Jesus gave 2 answers. You know, it's kind of a rabbi trick that he's kind of doing there. But one of the things that I want to lift up to you today is today we're going to talk about how you love your neighbor online. What does the Bible have to say about online stuff, from the internet to social media to everything in between and around it? And I've read the Bible from cover to cover many times, and I looked really carefully, and there isn't one specific place where it ever mentions the internet. Did you know that? If you read the Bible from cover to cover, it says nothing about who you should date on Tinder or if you should be on Tinder at all. It says nothing in the book of Genesis about how you're supposed to post your pictures on Facebook. It says nothing at all about the internet when you read the Bible. Does that mean the Bible has nothing to say and God has nothing to do with our lives when it comes to the internet? No. Because the Bible was written a long time ago when it didn't imagine at the time that there would be such a thing. But here's the beautiful thing about the Scriptures, is that it gives us the guidance and it gives us the trajectory by which to think about all things, regardless of whether or not it's driving on the freeway, dating online, how you go about your business and file your taxes. There isn't a single ethical question that's ever been set before us in the entire world that Jesus doesn't answer when he says this: love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you're ever wondering whether or not you should do this or that, the simple way to just solve the problem is you say, well, what's the most loving thing to do? What's the most loving thing to do? If you're in a fight with a couple friends and you're not sure which way to go, you just say, well, what's the most loving thing to do? If someone comes up to you on the street and asks for help, you say, well, what's the most loving thing to do? It's a pretty simple way to answer any very difficult ethical question. St. Augustine, who was a 4th century thinker, very famous, someone once, he was giving him all these questions that they were trying to get him to answer. And he said, well, wherever the Bible doesn't really give you clear guidance on what to do, love, and then just let all the rest happen. Because this is a crazy idea. If you're acting in love, you can't do anything wrong. If you're acting in love, there isn't a single thing that you could do that's wrong because you're doing it out of the kind of disposition which is, in essence, God. So if what you do is full of love, then you're doing what's good. But how do you know what you're doing is full of love, especially when it comes to online? So today I just thought of 6 things that I thought we could walk through when it comes to internet life. And this is not a complicated message, and you all are probably going to be disappointed at its lack of depth. But I know that there will be something in this message, I hope, that speaks to you and to your heart. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to list into a phase of our internet life and talk about the good side of it, but also the dark temptation that comes along with it and a biblical answer that might guide us in how to deal with it. The first one is Facebook. Facebook. I remember when Facebook wasn't even a thing. I don't say raise your hand, but in my house when I was growing up, we didn't have computers. There are people for whom they've always grown up with computers, but in my day, that wasn't always the case. Brian Janeway, you remember when, you had to write in stone, right? I mean, you just carved it out on a sheet. Yeah. You and Moses were hanging out together doing that. It's a new thing. One of the things that's important to remember is when it comes to about how the church guides people and how to live their online life, we have not had online life for very long, and therefore there isn't a deep set of principles to guide us in these things. And so it's important for the church to be actively thinking about how we do these things. But I know when it comes to Facebook, we all know the good side of it. The good side of it is that we can track girlfriends from high school and figure out what they're doing, right? Just, come on. You got to laugh just a little bit, right? You can get your news from, you can do all kinds of things. I know for me, when I was living in Germany for the very first time that I used Facebook. And this was even the MySpace days back in, if you even remember those days. But I remember I would be on MySpace and on Facebook, and one of the things that I thought was so cool is I found all these people that I had completely forgotten about. Folks from high school or even before that, and I was like, no way, this person's doing that, this person's married to whom? And it blew my mind to think that I could be reconnected to all these people from very far away. Of course, the temptation that we all know with Facebook is it gives you a false sense of connection. It gives you a false sense of connection. So you may have 200, 2,000, 20,000 friends on Facebook, but how many of them are your real friends? The real judge of whether or not someone is your friend is if whether or not you're going through a divorce or getting kicked out of your house, and those are the people that show up to help move you out, or who have an empty bed for you when you do get kicked out. Those are friends. Those are the friends who show up during your darkest, most difficult times. And we all know this, but the friends that we have on Facebook are not those people. In fact, if you put on Facebook really fast, hey, I need someone to show up really fast in order to help me out, I'm getting kicked out of my house, people would probably unfriend you because they're like, that's an inappropriate thing to do. You know, that's not how it rolls. A good use of Facebook, though. This is a really fun story from not very long ago. Just a few weeks ago, there was a mom who moved into Brickell that didn't know a soul in the area. And she moved into just one of the condos right over here. And on Facebook, she wrote a note that said, hey, I'm a single mom, and I've got a truck arriving, and I need some help getting my apartment ready. Is there anyone who could come help? And she put this out to the Brickell Mom Facebook group. And I was so proud of our church because the first two, and actually only two responders, were two folks from here at the church that showed up immediately to go help this young mom get her apartment ready for her family. I thought that was a beautiful thing that Facebook does. But Facebook only works when you connect face-to-face. You connect face-to-face. I'm thankful that I can FaceTime with my parents once in a while, and I'm thankful that I can be in touch with people all across the world. But at the end of the day, I need people who can give me a hug. And I really need people who can hold my hand. It's not the same thing whenever I do a hospital visit for someone who's in a lot of pain or isn't sure if they're going to live, and I just hold up a camera and say, here's someone who loves you. It's totally different when you reach out a hand and you hold them and you don't let go. The temptation with Facebook is it gives us a false sense of connection when God designed us for real connection. One of the things that's amazing about the Christian faith is we don't have a God who sits up in the sky and who looks down from a distance. But the essence of the Christian faith is that it's incarnational, that God became flesh and dwelt among us, and that you could have one day walked along the side of the road and actually bumped shoulders with Jesus, the Lord of the universe. Why did he become human? He became human because he knew that he created us to exist in that kind of physical relationship with other people. It's an important dynamic of who we are, and if we think we can ever become disconnected from our bodies, it's impossible. The Apostles' Creed, when we say, I believe in the resurrection of the dead, the life everlasting, it actually says the resurrection of the what? Of the body. In the Christian faith, the body is very important because we think that all things that God has created is good. So when you and I go to heaven, we don't go as just spirits. Did you know that? We go as embodied people. God actually says our bodies are good. It was Greek philosophy and Platonism that taught the idea that spiritual is good and matter and earthly things are bad. And the more spiritual up in the sky I can be, the better I'll be. But Genesis 1 contradicts all of that, where it says, and God created the plants and he said it was good. And then he made the trees and it was good. And then when he made you and me, it was very good. So when it comes to Facebook, I just want to say, it's good, but it's not very good. The thing that's very good is a face-to-face connection with people who love you and can love you in return. Second thing is Netflix. When it comes to Netflix, I read a statistic that almost 40% of the internet traffic is people watching and streaming Netflix. I'm not the only one that spent like weekends of my life just disappearing from the world binging on a show, right? I know I'm not the only one. In fact, to study for this series, I watched like a season or two of Black Mirror. I don't know if any of you have seen that. Man, that is dark stuff, but it actually explores the relationship between technology and people. I love Netflix. I love all that kind of stuff. I think it's a really healthy thing sometimes to just check out and watch TV and learn something new. You can watch documentaries, you can watch all kinds of things. But one of the dangerous temptations of the kind of access that we have to entertainment is that we end up wasting our lives doing things that are unproductive. We end up wasting our lives doing things that are unproductive. We're in the middle of a series, not necessarily tonight, but other nights, where we're talking about building God's kingdom. where every day we're going to be focusing on over the next few Sundays how we can be very practically getting our hands dirty to serve people in need through Habitat for Humanity that Amy's helping lead in just a couple of weeks, through going on mission trips to Honduras, to serving our local city in all kinds of different ways. And here's what I know: it is impossible to serve other people and watch Netflix at the same time. It's impossible. Why? Because Netflix is entertainment. It's all about just rest and enjoying yourself. And I want to emphasize this: it's okay to do that sometimes. God wants us to rest and enjoy good things. But I also know, when I look back on my personal life, I've wasted years of my life in entertainment where I could have been doing something productive. I've wasted a lot of time. And whenever I look back on my life, one of the things that I recognize is a lot of those decisions to just check out and to watch TV were very selfish ones. There were people I could have called. There were things I could have done that could have been a blessing. There are things I could have done just to bless my own life. You're like, if every time I have this like crisis of conscience where I'm like, there's an elliptical on this side of the house and my TV on this side of the house, and I'm standing there in between like, what's it going to be tonight? And I'm like, well, can I move the elliptical to watch Netflix? No, I can't. All right, Netflix, that's how we're going to do it tonight. I know what it's like, and here's my encouragement to you, is that if you find yourself being sucked in by the internet, by being sucked in by the desire to entertain yourself constantly, there is a brighter and better world out there for you of significance. God calls each one of us to live a life of significance that is more than just sitting back and being entertained. It's the vision of the gospel. I can't imagine what Jesus would have been like if he had come to earth and said, hey, I know I got to go heal some people, but I'm just going to go watch this play for a while first. Is that okay? I mean, we just wouldn't recognize Jesus if that's the kind of life that he lived. Yeah, I do think that he sat around the campfire telling jokes with his friends and laughing and having a good time sometimes. But I also don't think that he ever wasted a second of his life. And that's my challenge to you. Does the internet ever waste any of your time? I have this little program on my computer called Freedom. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but whenever I really need to get something done, I actually have to download this program and set it going so that it disables my ability to connect to the internet. That's how addicted I can be to the internet sometimes. I encourage you to find whatever practical boundaries you need in order to do that. The next one is fake news. Fake news. And I don't know what's fake news and what isn't. That's always the big debate. But one of the things I would encourage you, especially as more and more people are starting to get their news online, is to be the kind of intelligent and thoughtful person that seeks the source of their news and also tries to educate yourself from all sorts of directions, both left and right. You know, one of the things that concerns me about this country is that we tend to only want to see and hear the things that we want to see and hear, and everything else we push far and away. One of the things that I heard about just this last weekend when I was listening to a lecture on Martin Luther King Jr., one of the reasons why he was able to become a game changer throughout history is from the moment he was growing up, every time someone would teach him something, he would go learn the opposite thing. And then every time he got sure that this was the right thing, he would go and surround himself with people that believed the opposite of that, so that by getting all these different news sources, he would be able to make up an opinion for himself. So one of the things that made him great was that he sought out truth through seeking opposite sources of information, and he didn't want to be coerced by anyone else. You know, one of the things that I personally do as a discipline is I make sure that I read very right-wing news and very left-wing news so that I can at least get a sense of what's out there. When my wife and I were traveling in Indonesia last year, one of the things that we would do late at night is we would just turn on the TV in our little apartment room or wherever we were, and there's all these news stations that we've never heard of and never would see in the United States. And it was like they had invented a different world that we were watching, because we've never seen anyone talk about the world that they were talking about it. At least the way we see it in the United States. This is my encouragement to you. Did you know that when he says, love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your what? Mind. Love the Lord with all your mind. It's impossible to be a healthy Christian or disciple of Jesus and not use your mind. And that's because if you're full of passion and you're full of zeal, but you're not very smart about it, that zeal and that passion will take you into places that are unhealthy and disastrous and destructive for your life. But a healthy mind helps keep you focused on the right direction. So that would be my encouragement to you this evening. I heard there was an interview with President Obama that was done by David Letterman on Netflix. Yes, I was watching Netflix to get this information. But one of the examples that he gave was that if you Google this is the example that he gave. He gave the example of someone who was in Egypt, and they're in the main square in Egypt, and they're Googling it to see what's going on that day. Google knows if you're a more conservative person, and it'll say, all right, well, this is the Islamic crisis that's happening here. And if you're a more liberal person, it'll give you a more liberal result about that same search topic. And if you're a more moderate person, it'll just give you, different condo options on the Nile River as your option. But one of the things that's tricky for those of us that seek truth is that we don't know where to find it very often anymore when it comes to the world. It's a challenge. And so embrace that challenge. That would be my encouragement to you. What the world could use, I think, a little bit more is some passionate Christians who are also intelligent. And so seek truth wherever and however you can find it. Does that make sense? I think so. All right, got a couple more. The next one is Instagram, and I'm going to group Instagram and Twitter together on this one. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I used to be into Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all these things, but about a year or so ago, I just got rid of it completely. I unfriended everyone. I dropped everything. There's like faces right now of grimace and pain on people's faces hearing that I'm doing this. And the reason why I did it is because I felt like, I had this temptation to always be checking other things. And I would always be looking to see what's going on, and I kept getting distracted all the time. So I'd be working on a sermon, but then on the right-hand corner of my computer screen, every few seconds would be a pop-up of an email, a pop-up of someone's dinner that they're having this evening, a pop-up of a random thought that someone shared from someone else who they thought was smart, of commenting on something else. And then all this would be popping up on my screen while I'm trying to do a sermon. And one of the things that I finally got tired of was distraction. These things are good. It's okay to share what you're doing this day. And there's amazingly great uses of Twitter that you can have in the world. But for me, I found it to be a distraction. For me, I found it to be a distraction because it wants to be a distraction. Did you know that Twitter only makes money when you're looking at it? Instagram only makes money when you're using it. And so one of the things that they intentionally try to do is to captivate you, because the most important and most valuable thing you have in your life is your attention. If they can capture your attention, they have you. And your attention is the most valuable thing that you have. And one of the things that I started to notice about myself is these things that were always popping and popping and popping were drawing my most valuable asset away from the mission and the calling to which I felt like I was supposed to be doing, and to God. And instead, I just found myself wasting hours and hours of my life just wondering what other people were doing in the world that day. I don't know if you've been there, but I've certainly been there. And so I thought to myself, you know what? There's got to be a better way than this. And so one of the other challenges that I feel like with Instagram and Twitter especially is, with Twitter you're only limited to 140 characters or so, but I heard they're changing that. I'm not really sure. But I know you're limited to the amount of characters that you can write down. And that's really painful to someone that did a PhD. The way I was trained is that when you want to know the answer to a question, it requires at least a 350-page autograph manuscript that's then vetted and peer-reviewed by other people. And that's only one small piece of the pie, because there's going to be 40 other people that disagree with that. And then you have to have a conference in order to talk about. Anyway, any question requires books to figure out. And when I read Twitter, it's like someone will just have like this one zinger and be like, done. It's over. Game over, and when I look at that style of the way we treat people, with fast blurts of information, with really quick little pops as if that settles the end of debate, I started to think to myself, there's got to be more than 140 characters. The Bible's more than that, so I know there's more to life than just 140. But I want to encourage you to live a life of more depth, to live a life of more depth. We are more than just the images we post on Instagram. And we're way more than the one really, really cool quote that we like on Twitter. A person behind those things has so much more complicated, so much more beautiful, so much more amazing. When God looks down at us, he sees people that are wonderfully and beautifully made. And he doesn't see us in sound bites, and he doesn't see us in short little pictures. And I would encourage you to embrace people that way too. To not see people as the really cool way that they review you online, but as people behind the thing. So that's an encouragement to you tonight. There's two other things that I'm going to end with. The next one is a tough one, and it's pornography. One of the things that the Bible never mentions is how we deal with pornography. But we also know that in a church this size, or at least in the world, there's going to be a significant portion of the population that engages in it on a regular basis, both men and women. That pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry that represents a large chunk of the internet usage every single day. I was trying to get some statistics on it. It was overwhelming, but it was somewhere between 30 and 70%, and I couldn't figure out where the numbers fall when I was reading all the websites. But I know that it's a big deal. At the colleges that I went to, there was all these debates about whether or not you put blockers on and filters and how you're able to guide and shape people. I know that in my home, when Grace is old enough, we'll be having filters on our phones because I can't even control it all the time. I'll be Googling, like, how do I do this sermon this morning? And then hot women on Brickle will pop up as an advertisement on the side of my screen when I'm just trying to do ordinary sermon work on a Tuesday. It's everywhere and it's all around us. And one of the challenges with that is it presents this image, and all it is an image of what intimacy and happiness looks like. But it is as shallow and weak as it ever could be compared to the real thing. The other thing that challenges us with the idea of pornography is it says this is what it's supposed to be like. But then when you get with an ordinary person where you're with your spouse, hopefully, in that context it's totally different, and maybe your expectations don't match up to where things should be. I don't think there's anything more destructive for true intimacy than the fake intimacy that's presented on the internet. So my encouragement to you would be, is if that's something that draws you in, don't be drawn in by the fake thing, but truly pursue the real thing in a healthy way. Because that's the only way that you'll really find peace. The last thing is this, internet dating. Internet dating. When I was at Princeton Seminary and I was going to school there, one of the things we absolutely loved is the founder of eHarmony was a Princeton Seminary grad. And so we thought to ourselves, this guy is awesome. There's a chance we could make money someday if we graduate from here. You know, we're not going to be pastors. We need to develop dating websites for online stuff. I mean, this is brilliant. And we all tried to email him and see if we could get jobs with him, but it didn't work. You know, almost everyone I meet now when I do a wedding, almost everyone, I would say 70+%, meet the person online before they meet in person. I think that's an astounding difference from the way things were even just 30, 40 years ago. And the reason why that's astounding is because it's changing the way that we meet with people. When I had some friends over, my small group, a few months ago at my house, there's a guy who was in my small group, far better looking than me. Like, I have no chance to really be in his character. But he's hanging out with me, and he shows me his phone of his account, and there's girls that are trying to text him. And he says, Chris, I really need your help. Can you help me swipe left or swipe right? I really need your help debating what to do here. And I've never done this before. You know, I've been happily married for 12 years. I'm an old man. But he gives me his phone, and there was this like rush of excitement. Like, I get to judge people's value and character with the swipe of my finger. It was so much power. It was incredible. And he hands me the phone, and I'm like, oh, yes, no, yes, no. You know, and that's how you meet people nowadays. It kind of blows my mind that that's the way that it works. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way when you start to meet someone. I know a lot of friends that have done that. In fact, I'm doing a wedding for someone, one of my best friends who met his future wife that way online. And here would be my encouragement to you is to never forget that there's a person behind the image. That there's a person behind the image. We have such a temptation to judge people based on the outside, their skin color, their job, their, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it's shallow. Whenever you love someone, you don't judge them just based on the outward things, but you primarily are interested in what's on the inside. So that would be my encouragement to you. The internet has a way about it that makes us shallow, that makes us 1 inch deep. It goes really wide and far, and you can see amazing things with it, but you're never going to find the depth and realness that Jesus offers us. One of the things I love about church is it's almost the opposite of online life. When you come to church, you actually walk in a building. You know, okay, this is different. And then you shake someone's hand. They hand you a sheet of paper, and you're like, paper, what's this? I've never seen paper before. They hand you a sheet of paper, and then you walk in, and instead of hearing music that's just played on speakers, you hear people's real voices, sounds coming out of their mouths. You're singing next to people who have real heartbeats that are beating right next to you. Some of them even smell a little bit, like, I'm just teasing. But you know what I mean? They're real people. They're real people. And sometimes when you're doing communion and you see people coming forward, there's tears on their faces and there's thoughts going on inside their heads. I love church because it's real. This is not a fake thing that we're doing right now. This is almost as real as life gets. So I just want to leave 3 things with you before we end here. And the first one is this, is I would encourage you. I would strongly encourage you as much as possible to meet people in person. To meet people in person. When I was in grad school a few years ago, my wife and I were negotiating on whether or not we wanted to get this apartment, and we ended up going with something else. And this guy sent me an email, and he was really upset that I didn't accept his offer, and he had felt like I had accepted his offer already, and there was this fight between us. And so the temptation for me was to just kind of either hit delete, right? Oh, delete, ignore him, he's out of my life, I don't care about him whatsoever. Or to write an email back and just solve it that way. But like, it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, where I just said, you know what, I'm going to call him up and ask him if he wants to go have a coffee to talk about this. You know, so often we solve the deepest relational problems we have in our life with texts. There's nothing wrong with starting there, but your first time, anytime you have a disagreement with someone, is to say, hey, I'm really sorry that things have gotten where they are. Is there any way you and I could meet? If you want to develop healthy relationships with people, it's not going to be through texting, but it's going to be through looking at someone in the eye and sitting down face to face. One of the things here at this church is I'm the moderator of what's called a session, or our board. And one of my hardcore principles is that whenever we meet face to face. And the reason why is because I think when you meet face to face, things change. Things are different when you have to look someone in the eye. There's a lot of emails that I've been wanting to write before. Someone will really upset me, and I'll start getting angry fingers, and they'll start bouncing off the keyboard, like, no. And I'll get ready to hit send, and then I'll be like, oh, bad idea, really bad idea. And I always ask myself this: would I send that email if they were right here in the room and I was looking them in the eye? Would you actually take that email and read it out loud to them, to their face? Probably not. Because when we're face to face with something, we treat people differently, and I think there's something very healthy about that. The second thing I would encourage you when it comes to the internet and online stuff is to take breaks. One of the things that I very regularly do, and I encourage you to do the same thing, is to do this thing called a Sabbath. Did you know God made us every single week to take one day off to rest? And I also think that applies to our phones and to internet usage. So one of the things that I try and do, and we do this with our baby Grace, we try our best, not very well sometimes, but just to make sure that we take for an afternoon or most of a day, we'll take our phones and we'll just put them away so that we can spend quality time with one another just playing. One of the most important times of my life where I really felt close to God, I was walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain, where you start up in the French Alps and you walk all the way to Santiago. And for the whole trip, I didn't use a cell phone. I was totally disconnected. The only person I would check in with was Jen every other day or so, just to see how things were going. But I didn't have email, and I didn't tweet, and I didn't send any pictures. And for me, what that did is on the first few days, it was brutal. I was always touching this invisible thing in my pocket, where is it, And I didn't know what to do, and I'd want to take a picture of something, but then I would just be no, I'm just going to look at it. I'm just going to enjoy it for half a second and see what it's like. So I would encourage you to take breaks. What it does is it refreshes you and it enables you to reconnect to the world around you. And the last one is this, is when it comes to the internet, focus on your heart. So the two quotes that we have at the beginning of the bulletin, one is from Steve Jobs. He was talking about his company, and he said, it's not a faith in technology, it's a faith in people. He believed that technology is not bad. If you give it to people, it'll be good. That's tricky, right? Because I'm not sure if I have the same faith in people that he has. Bill Gates is super optimistic in the next quote. He says, technology is unlocking the innate compassion we have for our fellow human beings. That's really hard to say when you read the YouTube comments at the bottom of a video. It's really hard to say that technology is unlocking compassion when we see the way that kids feel bullied and take their lives often from the way people communicate online. So this would be my encouragement to you, is to remind yourself and me that technology is a tool. It's neither good nor bad, but how we use it makes a big difference. How we use it makes a big difference. Later on in the service, we're going to do something we've never done in this service, where I'm actually going to invite everyone to take out their phones, and we're going to do a little exercise in a second. So if you have your phone, you can turn it on now. And some of you are like, it's been on the whole time, right? But here's my prayer, you guys. I don't want us to ever be sucked in to the internet or to anything online in such a way where we lose track of the people to our left and right. We don't want to lose track of the people that are right in front of us, and we don't want to ever be tempted to treat people in an unhuman way because we think they're just an image on a screen. I think Jesus, if he were here, he would be the kind of person that actually showed up and knocked on our door and didn't send us an email. Because if you truly love someone, you'll take the time to actually be with them in the same room. That's my encouragement to you this evening. Will you pray with me? God, Help us as a community of faith to have loving hearts when it comes to the way we use our words and the way we type and with the pictures that we take. We ask that you would fill us with grace and with mercy and help us to be the kind of community that builds your kingdom here on earth through the way that we use our time when it comes to things online. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. And now would you please remain seated?